Dear friends, we warmly welcome you to the fourth episode of the series, The Youth and the Prophet. Today, we continue reading from a conversation that young people had with Gabriella in the early 1990s. Gabriella, the prophetess and emissary of God, answered the young people's questions with great empathy and insight. Gabriella also addresses what is commonly referred to as the generation gap. Let's get started and hear what she has to say about the relationship between young and old, as well as about the life's course of many people in this world. Honestly now, dear young people, you are still a bit wet behind the ears, just like the adult social climbers. This is why we have differences of opinions and ideas between young and old. Many a young person who rebelled against society and its social climbers became a conformist and an opportunist around the age of 30, allowing him to become integrated in society with its game rules and pretended morality, thus becoming one of those who chased just as much after prestige, success, power, and money, and still does so. Why is this?
Yes, why actually? Gabriele explains. If we analyze the concerns of young people who, for lack of experience, are usually not balanced but tend rather to fantasize, then we can see that young people would like to change many things, but have no idea how to go about it. Most parents and contenders for a position in society who are on their way up cannot offer any guidance either, because they themselves do not know the life qualities that make a society stable and shape its quality and are required by the common good in all areas of life. Every one of the social climbers wants only for himself, according to the principle, everything only for me. I don't care about the other one. Even though much is said in our society about work programs for the youth and helping young people, and many things are actually being done, the foundation on which young people could build is nevertheless missing. It would be important, for example, to learn to understand the young person and his character traits. It would be important to find out why he rebels and why he offers resistance in his external behavior. It would be important to understand why, as a young person, he becomes a conformist among his peers and later, around the age of 30, he allows himself to be integrated in a seemingly all-prevailing ego society. By doing so, he gives up the ideals and values that he at least had the rudiments of, for example, equality and freedom, instead going along with the millennium-old trend, me, everything only for me. I find this totally interesting because I recognize myself in what Gabrielle says. When I was about 20, I started to look beyond my own horizons and travel the world. And I didn't like what I saw. I had a strong desire to change the world, especially to make it a better place for nature and animals. And this goal also influenced my everyday life and my decisions. But I was also often very distraught because I didn't see any real way to truly change anything. Through Gabrielle's divine teaching, I have come to understand that lasting, genuine change in society can take place only if everyone is willing to change themselves, and that is something I myself can control.
Let's continue reading what more Gabriele said about this. Many young people believe in reincarnation and are aware that the various character traits of a person are inherited or are predispositions brought along from previous incarnations. Everyone brings different all too human attributes into this life on earth. Whatever all too human character traits are active in a person, they are what shapes the adult as well as the young person. The young person as well as the adult become, to a lesser or greater degree, conformists. Everyone is of the opinion that his social values serve society's needs. But when we look behind the mechanism of conformity, we sense where this leads to. Either one wants, if possible, a big piece of the cake of society, or one wants to be someone important or to keep one's position and, should the occasion arise, expand on it. It is seldom that a social climber asks himself whether what he is striving for is moral or immoral. Many think whether I'm a conformist or not doesn't matter. What's important is that my piece of cake is as big as possible.
How can we do things differently? Gabriella said the following about this. If I were young today and had this insight at the time in moral values, then I would certainly strive to understand my neighbor, to accept him instead of disparaging him, and not to put myself above him. Instead, I would support him. That is, I would be of good will and tolerant towards him. This would mean to apply what is already in the Sermon on the Mount. Whatever you want others to do for you, do to others first. I would most likely stop imitating others and would behave and dress according to what I felt reflected more noble, ethical, and moral values. Considering my spiritual knowledge today, that like always attracts like, I would also be aware of the fact that I would find friends who are striving towards the same or similar goals. Only in the awareness and fulfillment of the divine laws can young people build an ethically and morally worthy society that not only maintain high thoughts about the common good and makes nice speeches about it, but actively fosters the common good for all. This means that the grave differences between the richest and the poorest may no longer exist. Such a young person who works out his inner values, which are found in every human being, will not become a conformist at the age of 30. He will not allow himself to be drawn into the ego society with its taste for power and thinking in terms of its own prosperity.
Gabriele had another image for us to help us understand better. Let's briefly take another look at nature. Spring is the time of youth. No leaf and no flower will die itself of its own doing. They are beautiful just as they are. No animal lets its fur be dyed, nor does it change its species in any other way. It is as it is, and it is beautiful that way. If the young person dresses according to his type and according to the inner values growing in him, then he expresses the virtues and character traits of his youth. The summer, which brings with it the maturity and the onset of harvest, symbolizes the person who possesses qualities and abilities, that is, distinct professional qualities, which he has acquired through diligence and persistence, but also through a sense of community, as well as in the acknowledgement and observance of ethical and moral values. Such people are active in their professional life, and they will bear fruit, not only thinking of themselves, but of the well-being of all. They are rich in inner experiences and have good character traits. They prefer the true common good over excessive prosperity. Such people not only speak of the common good, but do their utmost so that all people are well off, insofar as the latter strive to serve the common good and are instrumental to its quality. I really like this image of a young person actively working for the common good, especially the idea that I'm not developing my skills just for myself, that I'm not learning and working just for myself, but also that I can work for the common good. Just imagine if everyone did that, then things would go well for everyone. And you know that wonderful feeling when you've been able to help someone with your skills. For example, in my work, when I get feedback from a customer that a product has been good for them and helped them, I'm really happy that I was able to contribute to that with my work.
Ja, dieses schöne Gefühl kenne ich auch.
Yes, I know this nice feeling too. Let's continue reading what else Gabriele said about this. Every one of us knows that the one who damages the common good damages himself. Gradually, he excludes himself from the development of the common good and is concerned only with his own well-being. This is the way of today's society. As we can see now, this cannot last. If we want a society distinguished by high morals and ethics, then this should develop from a young generation that not only rebels, showing itself off with bright-colored hair, piercing, clothes of the 70s, brand names that everyone just has to have, with bell-bottom pants and platform shoes, but instead develops inner, that is, high-standing values that are the guarantee for a society of moral character. This then furthers the spirit of the common good for all people who want to think and act for the true common good, who develop abilities of high quality in family and profession. Today, it's perhaps less about dyed hair and bell-bottoms, but more about showing off on social media and wanting to portray something that you are actually not. A healthy work-life balance is also a big issue for many young adults today. However, this usually concerns only themselves, which is much time as possible for hobbies and personal pleasures. I've noticed that while this makes you happy in the short term, it doesn't bring satisfaction in the long run. For me, it is important that I take control of my own life and make the most of every day rather than letting it slip by unconsciously. I found a job that I really enjoy, helping others, in this case, animals. Every day, I learn something new from the animals and the people, which gives me the opportunity to further develop my external skills as well as my inner values. It's not always easy, but it's worth persevering. The feeling you get when an animal feels better because you were able to help it, and you see the thankfulness in the animal's eyes, makes me feel even more deeply thankful to God that we have the opportunity to help them, and not only the animals, but also people and nature. And that gives me true inner satisfaction.
The young man in conversation with Gabriela said, "Now I understand many things. For example, that one cannot make a better world by demonstrating and saying, we want things to be different. And that, in the final analysis, it is up to the individual what he makes of his life. No one can change things for someone else. No one can force his convictions, no matter how good they are, on his fellow people, or his higher ethical and moral values." Gabby, you speak of the confrontation between rebellious youth and society, but often it is our parents with whom we have run-ins on a very personal level. In our opinion, they often react like squares and get in our way. Gabriela responded to this. At this point, I would like to make an appeal to you young people to be more understanding of your parents and maybe of your grandparents too. How often do we hear young people, "My parents get in the way. They are a bit odd. They're incompetent to deal with today's youth." I looked in the dictionary to see what odd means. There, it says that odd means to have strange, ridiculous habits or principles, and to hold on to them stubbornly, to be peculiar, dotty, somewhat zany, crazy. If you can compare today's younger generation, which grew up in prosperity, with earlier generations, then you would be more understanding of your parents, and maybe even grandparents. Not all parents and grandparents can just simply be called a bit odd, because in past generations, when your parents and grandparents were still in their puberty, customs were quite different.
Gabriele explained further. Especially during your grandparents' time, there was a strict etiquette that everyone had to conform to. Certain things were not allowed, others had to be done. There were no ifs and buts allowed to young people. There were rules about what one does and does not do, also concerning very proper table manners and one's behavior in a social setting, where certain ways of expression had become customary or even put on. There were many rules for children, for example, when greeting adults or, in some cases, even their peers. They had to bow or curtsy. On Sundays, certain clothes and shoes were worn, which were not to be worn on work days. The parents of those days kept a strict watch over the children to see with whom they had contact and to make sure they had no premarital relationships. Usually, the children and the young adults, too, had little personal freedom. In general, they had to be well behaved and obedient. That is, they had to fit in. From childhood to adulthood, life was often marked by strict, rigid rules and taboos, so that the children would make a good impression in front of friends and relatives. The parents of that time themselves were not always as flawless as they raised their children to be. They often forbade their children to do what they themselves enjoyed in secret. Nevertheless, the children had to obey, which they usually did. The parents often drew conclusions from their own behavior about how to bring up their children.
When I hear about the times in which our grandparents and parents grew up, I'm simply grateful for the freedom they gave us, despite their own much stricter upbringing, and also for the many opportunities I had as a young person. Let's continue listening to what Gabriele explained. She said, "For your parents, customs usually were no longer as formal and stiff as was the case with your grandparents, yet they too still had their share of, as you would say, the musty whiff of past generations. So you cannot label your grandparents' or parents' behavior as simply odd. It was marked by the way children were raised then, which many a youngster probably tried to escape, to the dismay of the relatives who were ashamed of the black sheep in their family. Surely parents and grandparents can also tell about how they deliberately did what they shouldn't have, how they played tricks on others, and so on. However, this remained an exception in the middle-class society back then. You young people of today were born into the high point of a so-called economic miracle, into a society which has lost its basic ethical moral principles to a large degree, not to mention manners and special patterns of behavior. Your parents may have grown into this economic miracle, but they were still raised by parents whose norms decisively shaped them. Behavioral programs that are shaped during childhood and youth are often more or less effective throughout one's entire life. Many people of the older generation cannot understand the behavior of today's youth, who have taken a gigantic generational leap forward as a result of this time of economic prosperity, because the picture of the way they were raised as children and young adults is still very much alive in them. Because of this, they often raise their own children and appeal to you young people using the norms and criteria from back then. Well, as a mother, I can say that you always want the best for your child and that you naturally want to protect them. Your own upbringing plays a role in how you raise your children. I pass on to my child the values that I learned from my parents and that I consider important. Now I have developed a true understanding from my parents and grandparents, and I'm truly grateful for what they have done for us.
Dear friends, that brings us to the end of our episode for today. Gabriele again encouraged us not to become imitators and not opportunists either, but to strive for higher ethical values. In the next program, the prophetess Gabriele gives us some help on how we can develop more understanding for our parents. In addition, we'll hear what she has to say about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We'll be happy to have you tune in again next time, when we'll read further from the conversation between the youth and the prophet. Until then, all the best and greetings in God.